After 19 years, Hollywood's most graceful love story has reached its final chapter. Nicole Kidman, the woman whose poise once defined red carpets and whose smile made people believe in forever, has chosen silence instead of spectacle. Her husband, country music star Keith Urban, has done the same. No statements, no shouting matches, no headlines filled with blame, just two people who once built something rare, letting it go quietly. To outsiders, it looked sudden. But behind that calm exterior lies a story that took years to unfold. A story of endurance, devotion, and the slow fading of something that once felt unbreakable. Because this isn't gossip. This is truth, pieced together from verified reports, eyewitness accounts, and the emotional moments that slipped through the cracks of fame. It's the story of how love, even when built on honesty and admiration, can erode in whispers instead of explosions. And sometimes, the most powerful confessions aren't spoken, they're felt. The confirmation that Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban have officially separated after 19 years marks the end of one of Hollywood's most admired marriages. But their story doesn't begin with heartbreak. It begins with hope, and with two people who truly believed they could outrun the noise of fame. For nearly 2 decades, Nicole and Keith were the symbol of stability in a world that rarely allows it. Every red carpet told the same story. Her elegance beside his charm, her calm matching his energy. At the Oscars, they looked timeless. At the Country Music Awards, they looked at home. They smiled for cameras, leaned close in interviews, and radiated the kind of peace that made people believe love could survive anything. According to People magazine, friends described them as anchored, private, and deeply in love. The Sydney Morning Herald once called them Hollywood's calm in the chaos, a couple untouched by scandal, untouched by ego, the kind of love story that made the public feel safe, believing in forever. But what the world didn't see was how much effort it took to keep that illusion alive. Behind the red carpets and award shows, the rhythm of their relationship began to change. Between movie sets, music tours, and public expectations, their love slowly turned from spontaneous to scheduled. Conversations that once came easily now required effort. Laughter that once filled their home began to fade into polite silence. Their chemistry, though still beautiful, started to feel rehearsed. Even close friends noticed something different, a tenderness replaced by tension. They weren't fighting. They weren't angry. They were simply holding on to an image that the world refused to let them change. Every smile, every interview, every affectionate gesture became part of a performance, not for fame, but for survival. And while millions adored that performance, it came with a cost. Because the greatest illusion in Hollywood isn't fame or beauty, it's happiness. What began as small gaps in their schedules soon became miles of quiet distance. Nicole's filming took her across continents. London, Morocco, Los Angeles, while Keith's tours stretched across the United States. According to The Guardian, they spent fewer than 60 days together during 2024. On paper, that sounded normal for two international stars. In reality, it was heartbreaking. They called it balance, but it was distance disguised as duty. When they were apart, they relied on texts, video calls, and carefully timed visits. But even when they reunited, something felt missing. The connection that once felt effortless now needed reminding. Their conversations grew shorter. Their messages became more formal. Even their laughter, once spontaneous, felt cautious, like they were afraid of waking something fragile. Insiders told People magazine that friends noticed subtle changes. The glances across rooms became fewer. The physical closeness that once drew attention at events now felt distant, polished, not passionate. They smiled, but it was the kind of smile that belonged to people who remembered what happiness used to feel like. Behind the walls of their Nashville home, they still cared deeply for one another. But care isn't always enough. Fame gives everything: money, recognition, applause, except time. And time is the one thing love quietly demands. Their public image remained flawless. Together, they attended galas, premieres, and charity events. But offstage, they began living parallel lives. Nicole lost herself in her work, playing characters that mirrored her quiet longing. Keith buried himself in his studio, pouring emotion into music that sounded like therapy. They didn't fight for attention or blame each other for distance. They simply drifted one day at a time, until the gap between them wasn't miles, it was silence. It only took one question, one harmless interview moment to make the world notice what had been happening for years. It was June 2025. Nicole was promoting her film A Family Affair alongside Zac Efron. During a press junket, a reporter asked her the kind of questions celebrity couples hear all the time. "How does Keith feel about your romantic scenes in the movie?" Nicole smiled, that same calm, graceful smile she'd worn for decades, and replied, "He's an artist. He understands. It was polite. It was poised. It was everything the world expected from her." But hours later, during a live radio interview from Nashville, Keith Urban was asked the same question, and this time there was no smile. He froze, there was a long pause, and then quietly he ended the call. That silence went viral. According to Entertainment Tonight, the clip reached over 10 million views within hours. Fans replayed it endlessly, analyzing every second, the hesitation, the look in his eyes, the emotion he didn't hide. Some said it was heartbreak in real time. Others called it the first honest moment in years. For Nicole and Keith, it was the sound of their private world colliding with public curiosity. Their carefully guarded image began to fracture. Neither issued a statement, neither corrected the rumors, and neither denied the growing speculation, because they didn't need to. Their silence said everything. The Sydney Morning Herald captured it best. Their mutual quiet spoke volumes. For years, they had chosen silence to protect their love. But now, that same silence revealed its ending. People close to the couple say that moment, that brief, unguarded silence, changed everything. It was as if the act of pretending finally became heavier than the truth itself. Friends later confirmed to People magazine that Nicole and Keith had already begun planning a parenting arrangement weeks before the official filing, a sign that the separation was not sudden, but slow and deliberate. While the world was dissecting one viral moment, they were preparing for something far more private. A goodbye that would protect their daughters and preserve their dignity. Keith poured his heart into songwriting. Nicole focused on her daughters and her work. Their love didn't collapse overnight. It quietly folded under years of distance, exhaustion, and the unspoken weight of always appearing strong. Because when you spend years performing happiness, the silence that follows can feel like peace, even if it's heartbreak. In Hollywood, endings are rarely quiet. They usually arrive with accusations, scandals, or tabloid drama. But Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban chose a different kind of ending, one without bitterness or spectacle. Their story reminds the world that love doesn't always vanish in anger. Sometimes it fades gently, through time, distance, and the realization that holding on can hurt more than letting go. They didn't fall out of love. They simply outgrew the version of love that once defined them. And in that quiet, they gave the world something rare, proof that endings can still carry grace. Because in a city built on noise, Nicole and Keith found strength in silence. And maybe that's why their story, even in its heartbreak, feels so human. It's not about betrayal. It's not about scandal. It's about two people who did their best until the best they could offer each other was peace. If you've been moved by what you've heard so far, take a second to subscribe. Every week on Cinematic Sins, we uncover the real stories behind Hollywood's most talked about lives, the kind that reveal not just fame, but feeling. When Nicole Kidman quietly filed for divorce, it didn't make front-page headlines at first. There were no explosive press conferences, no teary interviews, no dramatic paparazzi chases. It came as a whisper, a single court document in Nashville, Tennessee, that marked the end of nearly 2 decades of what many thought was an unshakable marriage. But if you followed their story closely, you'll know this wasn't a decision made overnight. The signs were there, hidden beneath red carpets and movie premieres, subtle and almost invisible to the untrained eye. It's the kind of unraveling that doesn't happen in one fight or one betrayal. It happens in the spaces between words, in the silences between text messages, in the nights when one person is on set in another country and the other is on stage in another state. It's the slow erosion of connection, the kind that looks perfect to the world and quietly painful to the people living it. By all accounts, the couple had been living parallel lives long before the paperwork. Nicole, ever the dedicated artist, had poured herself into her craft more intensely than ever before. Her schedule was relentless, filming back-to-back projects like Expats and The Perfect Couple, promoting brand campaigns, and managing production duties through her company, Blossom Films. Keith, meanwhile, was on the road for months at a time, touring across the US and Europe. Both were thriving professionally, but success came at a cost. One close friend told Vanity Fair that they were both in motion all the time, 2 careers that never stopped. For a long time, they convinced themselves that this was balance, that distance could be managed, that phone calls and short visits could replace shared mornings and long conversations. But as months turned into years, the rhythm that once kept them connected began to falter. Nicole has always been open about her emotional nature. In past interviews, she's said that she loves deeply and completely, that when she gives herself to someone, she does it without holding back. Keith, on the other hand, had spoken about how Nicole's love saved him in ways that few people could understand. When they first met in 2005 at the G-Day USA Gala, he was still struggling with addiction and uncertainty. She stood by him through his lowest moments, guiding him through rehab and recovery. In his music, he immortalized her in songs like Once in a Lifetime, Without You, and Gemini. She was his muse, his anchor, his reminder of what stability looked like. But over time, the very thing that once bonded them, their deep emotional connection, began to shift under the weight of life's demands. People close to the couple described 2023 and 2024 as the silent years. There were no explosive arguments or scandals, just emotional distance. Nicole had begun spending more time filming overseas, particularly in Europe and Asia, while Keith's commitments tied him to Nashville. Insiders say they had started leading separate routines. She was often surrounded by film crews and castmates, while he was immersed in music studios and late-night sessions. According to one report in the Daily Mail, Nicole spent over 180 days abroad in 2024 alone. That same year, Keith released one of his most introspective albums in years, with lyrics that fans now describe as eerily prophetic. In one track, he sings, "I tried to find you in the quiet, but the quiet never ends." Listeners now see that line as a reflection of what was happening behind closed doors. Two people trying to reach each other through the noise, only to realize that silence had become their only connection. Nicole's public demeanor never changed. She continued appearing at events, calm, composed, radiant. But observant fans noticed small shifts. She attended fewer award shows with Keith. Their social media posts together, once filled with affection, slowed to a halt. Their last joint appearance was at the 2024 Met Gala, where the two posed side by side, smiling as always. But insiders claim that the energy between them was noticeably different. They were kind, respectful, but distant, one eyewitness told People magazine. They looked like partners more than lovers. The emotional disconnection became more apparent during interviews. Nicole began speaking about solitude and growth in ways that sounded less like promotion and more like personal reflection. In one interview with Vogue Australia, she said, "You reach a point in life where peace becomes more important than anything else. More than passion. More than perfection." It was a simple quote, but it struck a chord. Fans began speculating whether she was referring to her marriage. Within weeks, the internet was full of theories. Some believed they were taking a break. Others thought they were heading for a quiet separation. But Nicole and Keith stayed silent, refusing to feed the rumor mill. That silence, as always, became the loudest statement. When the official filing came in October 2025, it was meticulously private. No leaks, no dramatics, just a legal confirmation that what fans feared was true. The petition, filed in Davidson County Court, cited irreconcilable differences, the same phrase used by countless Hollywood couples before them. But in Nicole's case, it carried the weight of authenticity. There was no bitterness, no custody battle, no financial war. They had already made arrangements for their daughter's privacy and stability. Friends described the process as mature and deeply respectful. One insider told Entertainment Tonight, they had been preparing emotionally for this for a long time. By the time the papers were filed, the grieving was already done. The aftermath has been a study in grace. Nicole has been seen attending church in Sydney, often accompanied by her sister Antonia. Keith has kept his focus on music, performing at charity events, and keeping a low profile. Both have avoided public statements, which is remarkable in a culture that thrives on confessions and exclusives. But for those who know Nicole, this silence is her strength. She's no stranger to heartbreak. Her previous marriage to Tom Cruise ended under intense public scrutiny. She once described that experience as a shock to the system, a loss that felt like an earthquake. This time, she's doing it differently. She's older, wiser, and more protective of her peace. Keith, too, seems to have found solace in maturity. Instead of seeking attention or validation, he's focused on his craft. During a recent concert in Las Vegas, fans noticed that he skipped his usual dedication to Nicole before performing Parallel Line, a song once believed to be inspired by her. Instead, he simply said, "Sometimes love changes shape, but it doesn't disappear." It wasn't confirmation, but it was enough. It told the story of a man who still carries love, but no longer in the same form. What makes this separation different from the usual Hollywood split is the absence of blame. There's no villain in this story, no scandalous betrayal or shocking revelation. It's simply the natural ending of a long love story that gave both of them what they needed for a time: healing, companionship, purpose. And that's perhaps the most painful truth of all. Sometimes love does everything it's supposed to, and it still ends. Sometimes two people can save each other and still have to let go. Industry insiders say that Nicole's upcoming projects have taken on a new emotional depth. Her next film, The Silent Season, reportedly explores the theme of love lost through time, a haunting parallel to her own life. Meanwhile, Keith's next album, expected in early 2026, is said to be his most vulnerable work yet. According to Rolling Stone, the record will explore forgiveness, memory, and the spaces love leaves behind. It's as if both of them are using their art to process what words can't express. But perhaps the most striking part of this story is how the world has reacted. Fans, journalists, and even fellow celebrities have shown an unusual amount of empathy. There's no mockery, no who did what narrative. Just collective respect for a couple who chose to end things quietly without destroying each other in the process. In an industry that celebrates chaos, Nicole and Keith's restraint feels revolutionary. Their divorce has become less a scandal and more a mirror, a reminder that real relationships, even those wrapped in glamour, are fragile, human, and deeply vulnerable to time. For those who followed them since that first photograph at the G-Day USA Gala, the ending feels bittersweet. 19 years of shared laughter, 2 daughters, countless memories, all distilled into a single decision to part peacefully. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the real beauty of their story isn't in how long it lasted, but in how gently it ended. They loved deeply, they grew, and when it was time, they chose peace over pride. And in a world obsessed with noise, that choice says everything. Their story may have ended on paper, but emotionally, it lingers. Not as tragedy, but as truth. Because what Nicole and Keith have shown the world is that even the most perfect-looking love can evolve into something quieter, wiser, and more enduring than romance: mutual respect. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear it. Not the sound of heartbreak, but of release. 2 people walking away not because they stopped caring, but because they finally understood that letting go is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. In the weeks that followed the divorce filing, something extraordinary happened. Silence began to tell a story louder than any interview ever could. Hollywood waited for tears, for accusations, for some explosive quote to fuel the tabloids. But it never came. Nicole Kidman remained poised, her presence calm and unshaken. Keith Urban continued to perform, though his music sounded softer, more introspective. And in that rare quiet, people began to understand something profound. That maybe this wasn't a story of betrayal or loss, but of transformation. Because when a marriage ends after 19 years, it's not just about 2 people separating. It's about an entire world shifting. The habits, the shared memories, the rituals of ordinary life that once defined love, now existing only in echoes. Nicole had always described her relationship with Keith as her safe place, a refuge from the chaos of Hollywood. For years, she called their home in Nashville her sanctuary, a world away from flashing cameras and film sets. Friends remember that she would often bake, garden, and play with their daughters on weekends, while Keith would write music in his home studio. It was beautiful, one insider told People. They made an effort to live simply. But over time, that simplicity became harder to maintain. Fame isn't a guest that visits occasionally. It's a presence that lingers, demands attention, and quietly consumes. Every choice, every photograph, every public appearance carried the weight of expectation. Nicole was the Oscar-winning actress. Keith was the country music legend. Together, they represented an ideal. And sometimes, ideals are the hardest to live inside. After the divorce became public, Nicole was photographed leaving a church in Sydney with her daughters. She looked serene, dressed in soft beige, her hair loose, her smile gentle but reflective. There was no trace of bitterness, just the kind of quiet that comes from acceptance. According to the Sydney Morning Herald, she has spent most of her time focusing on family, leaning on her sister Antonia, and a small circle of lifelong friends. She's been meditating, journaling, and spending mornings by the ocean. Nicole's learned how to breathe again, one friend said. She's not broken, she's healing. Keith, on the other hand, has found his peace through music. His performances have taken on a different energy. Less showmanship, more storytelling. At a recent benefit concert, he told the crowd, "Sometimes the hardest thing you can do is be honest with yourself and with someone you love." The audience fell silent. He didn't say her name, but everyone knew who he was talking about. After the show, fans flooded social media with messages of support. They weren't mourning a breakup. They were celebrating two people who managed to handle pain with integrity. For Nicole, the divorce isn't the first time she's had to start over. Her marriage to Tom Cruise ended abruptly, under intense scrutiny, leaving her emotionally raw and professionally uncertain. She once described that period as walking through fire, saying it taught her that you can survive what you thought would destroy you. And in many ways, her split from Keith feels like a quieter version of that same rebirth. She's no longer the woman in her 30s struggling to find her footing. She's a woman in her late 50s who knows exactly who she is and what she values. Her recent interviews have reflected that shift. In a Bizarre feature, she said, "I've learned that strength isn't about holding everything together. Sometimes, it's about letting go gracefully." Behind the public calm, though, there's still emotion. No 19-year love story ends without heartbreak. Insiders say the couple shared one final private moment before the legal filing, a quiet meeting at their Nashville home, away from lawyers and advisors. There were no arguments, no accusations, just closure. They hugged for a long time, a source told Entertainment Weekly. It wasn't goodbye in anger. It was goodbye with love. They reportedly agreed to continue raising their daughters with shared values, maintaining family traditions like Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings. To them, the end of marriage didn't mean the end of family. It simply meant redefining what family meant. Nicole has also found creative release through her upcoming film, The Silent Season. Insiders say she poured her emotions into the project, which tells the story of a woman rediscovering herself after years of quiet compromise. Those who've seen early footage describe her performance as raw, deeply personal, and hauntingly real. It's Nicole at her most vulnerable, one producer shared. "You can feel that she's lived every line." Meanwhile, Keith's next album, as still untitled, reportedly includes songs that trace the arc of love, forgiveness, and release. One of them, leaked to a few insiders, includes the lyric, "If love was a home, we left the lights on." It's poetic, bittersweet, and exactly what fans have come to expect from him. Honesty wrapped in melody. Their daughters, Sunday and Faith, have been their priority through it all. Both parents have been careful to shield them from public scrutiny. Nicole has spoken about motherhood as her greatest grounding force, saying it's the one role that makes her feel whole no matter what's happening in her career. Those close to the family say the girls have adjusted well, surrounded by love and stability. Keith reportedly still visits often, and the family continues to share meals and celebrate milestones together. "They're doing this with grace," said a family friend. It's not about blame, it's about balance. What's remarkable about Nicole and Keith's split is how it's redefining the narrative of celebrity divorce. For decades, Hollywood separations have been synonymous with chaos, public feuds, legal battles, scandalous headlines. But this one has reminded people that endings don't always have to destroy what came before. Sometimes they can preserve it. Nicole once said in an interview that she believes in the evolution of love. That philosophy now feels prophetic. Their love evolved from passion to partnership, from partnership to peace. The entertainment world, of course, continues to speculate. There are whispers of new beginnings for both, Nicole focusing on her career's next chapter and Keith preparing for a world tour. But those who know them best say romance isn't their priority. Healing is. They're both in a reflective space, a source told The Hollywood Reporter. It's not about moving on fast. It's about understanding what those 19 years meant. And maybe that's why their story resonates so deeply. Because it's not about failure. It's about finishing something with dignity. The emotional aftermath has also sparked a larger conversation about how Hollywood treats women after divorce. Nicole's choice to remain silent, rather than perform her pain for public consumption, is being praised as a powerful act of self-preservation. In an industry that often reduces women to their relationships, she's reclaiming her narrative. "She's not Keith Urban's ex," one critic wrote. "She's Nicole Kidman, and she's free." That sentiment has inspired thousands of comments online from fans who see her as a symbol of quiet resilience. As for Keith, his artistic resurgence could mark a new era in his music. Insiders say he's working on collaborations with younger artists, using his experience to mentor others while refining his own sound. His performances have taken on a more soulful, confessional tone, as though he's finally singing not to entertain, but to heal. And maybe that's what makes this chapter of their lives so moving. They're not trying to rewrite the past. They're simply learning to live in the present, honestly, humbly, and without regret. Because when you think about it, what Nicole and Keith have done is something most people only dream of. They loved fully, they grew together, and when the time came, they had the courage to part with grace instead of bitterness. Their story isn't tragic, it's human. It's about learning when to fight for love and when to set it free. And in a world obsessed with drama, that kind of quiet ending feels revolutionary. Years from now, when people look back on Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's marriage, they might not remember every red carpet moment or every interview quote. They'll remember the silence, the kind of silence that speaks of mutual respect, of two hearts that once beat in harmony and learned to find their rhythm apart. Because not all love stories end with a grand finale. Some end in whispers, with gratitude instead of grief. And that's what makes theirs unforgettable. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's marriage may be over, but the love they built, the genuine affection, the memories, the music, the shared dreams, will always exist. Not as a ghost, but as proof that even in endings, beauty remains. And maybe that's the truth everyone suspected all along, that their story was never about perfection. It was about humanity, flawed, fragile, and fleeting, but real. In the end, that's what makes it timeless.